Hello and welcome to the CFB Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and I am here bright and early for the final non-bowl game, non-conference championship full slate. We are going to break down as much as we can from this slate. There is a lot to go over. The show on Wednesday night, of course, covered yesterday's slate, which was a wacky one. Now we have a lot of games here to go through, a ton of news to talk about. We're going to try and be super efficient here on the FTN Network. Speaking of which, the promotion is still going on in which you can sign up for 50% off your first month subscription over at ftndaily.com. Get yourself that code NIGHTHOOPS. That's going to get you access to every single sport under the daily plus monthly package, pro sports, niche sports, optimizers, content galore, green screens. If that's your thing, we bring you all the green screens possible, walk you to the window as many times as possible. Lots of fun stuff. Fire those questions away. If you're watching live, please make sure you hit the like button, share the show, and then fire away comments, questions, concerns. There won't be any time to answer the obligatory one NFL question per show. Just no time. Now, I don't have an article out for this slate. This is the first semi-main slate of the year that I don't have one. I apologize in advance, but figured we'd do Discord plays. Which we've done. We'll talk in depth here. We'll answer all the questions, and we'll get ready to rip and run. Injury news is where we want to start. I will also kind of go over what I think ownership should be or will be. A core, any props, any prize picks. We'll do a condensed version of what the normal Thursday CFB Super Show would be. Instead of 2 hours, we're going to do it in 45 minutes. Let's get after it. All right, so I have some news here to talk about first. We know that on the ASU side, we'll start there. Quarterbacks. Jaden Rashada back after missing most of the season since week 2, still somehow leading the team in passing touchdowns. Just kind of tells you how this ASU offense really is. Apparently, after getting excited, like, hey, we got a 4 or 5 quarterback going into our sleep last night, wake up to the report of Rashada missing a team meeting or being late for a team meeting, which means he's not actually going to start. We are still going to see Trenton Bourguet. Now, ASU has very little to play for. It would make sense to get Rashada reps. However, coaches got to teach them life lessons. So we don't know just how much Rashada will see. It'll probably end up being like a first quarter from Trenton and then Rashada the rest of the way, because we know what we got in Trenton Bourguet. It's really not a lot. So if you want to still play him at 4 or 5, it's fine. I think he's much more of a GPP option now instead of like a main lineup play, because the thing about it, there's still an opportunity to whiff here at 4 or 5 if he puts up a single-digit fantasy total, or that life lesson extends into the second half. That could be very, very detrimental. There are some key misprices. There are some really high prices, and there are just overall the potential for this slate to have a lot of scoring. So you really need to be careful about what you do with some of these options. Sticking with ASU, Elijah Badger, their WR1, it has just been announced that he will miss this season finale against Arizona. That is a big blow. 65 receptions, over 700 yards. They give him carries, like just the number one option. Xavier Guillory, who was doubtful heading into this one, is also going to be out from what I've read. He's been out since week 8 anyways. We still don't have a man, Jordan Tyson. He played a couple of snaps earlier, but he's just not himself, unfortunately. So that leaves really a condensed target share amongst tight end Jalen Conyers, who's there at 3.9, somebody who could really blast off. The kid at 3.6, Troy O'Meara. Troy O'Meara had 5 for 57 last week. He's definitely somebody at 3.6 I think you could possibly play in a main lineup. Conyers would be my favorite, but if you need a little bit of salary savings, you do get it there. And I'm always of the mind and strategy of paying down at wide receiver when possible. I put a big premium on running back, and I typically like to play a quarterback that I don't have to worry about possibly playing, limited snaps, or, hey, they've never played, a D1 game, and we're going to put all of our so that means I'm going to be paying up at quarterback for at least one spot. Yesterday, we had a litany of running backs go nuts. It was a running back slate. This slate doesn't have quite as many elite running backs. At least I don't think so. So you can pay up for at least one wide receiver if you want, but there are plenty of pay downs. And then the third option there would be Melquan Stovall at 4K. He is a very lean option, and he happens to be more expensive than the other two. So Conyers and Omir would be the plays there if you need some value at the ASU wide receiver spot. It is senior day technically for JRP. I know he's a junior, but I believe due to red shirts and everything else, he's technically out of eligibility now. That could be wrong, and they could maybe find a way to get him a waiver for another year, but I do believe this will be the end of the JRP regular season era in college football. So take that for what it's worth at 8.2. I know a lot of people are playing RJ Harvey, so Plumlee GPP look at 8.2 could make a lot of sense. Texas A&M will be starting Jalen Henderson once again. He was the player that burst on the scene against Mississippi State, 32 fantasy points at min price, only 6'4" against LSU. LSU's defense, they give up points in droves, a very, very fantasy-friendly unit. We know the LSU offense, they're going to put up a lot of points, so Jalen Henderson does make a lot of sense there, and you can totally utilize him. Evan Stewart will not be playing in this game. Didn't travel. Sounds like he's probably done. There is a ton of rumors across multiple message boards that Evan Stewart's just going to hit the transfer portal. Kind of weird. I mean, he was their number one guy. He did have a big reduction in production. Rhyming. And he hasn't been the same level of weapon that he was earlier in the season. But with that news, I would highly doubt we see him in a Texas A&M uniform ever again. So that leaves us with the obvious, which is Aniyah Smith. He's 5'5". It's a fair price. He has been a letdown whenever I've used him on the slate this year, but he obviously has a solid floor. I'm instead looking at two cheaper options, one being Jade Walker at 4.6, who I actually like a whole lot. I do believe he is going to be a supremely low owned because people are going to be looking to Moose Muhammad. We've waited for Moose Muhammad to turn into a WR1-esque type option for years. It seems that opportunity could finally be here for him. He's only 4K, so I believe a lot of people, most of the industry, will end up using Moose Muhammad. I think that's great. Looking at targets, he has 31, 22 catches, 263 yards, 2 touchdowns. He is far down the list in targets. He's 6th, but they are clearly going to be looking his way today. 7 targets in their last game against the mighty Abilene Christian, 4 receptions, 104 yards, and a touchdown. So we should see a lot of ownership there. I personally really like Jade Walker. He looks the part to me. Not a big eye test guy or anything hey, the metrics say this, my eyes say this. I just feel like we watch enough of these college sports. We kind of have an idea of when somebody is good. And Jade Walker, to me, looks the part. The Ole Miss game especially kind of announced him. 10 targets, 8 catches for 100 yards. Caught 4 of his 5 targets last week for 88 yards. Had a touchdown catch against Mississippi State. Only 1 catch for 11 yards from 3 targets against them, but 1 did go for a score. He is more expensive than Moose Muhammad. His target share may end up being on par with Moose, but I just think we see a lot of high-quality looks for Walker. Now, we do have a big Texas A&M fan in our Discord saying that Moose Muhammad has been getting the hype most of the week, and he is the play, and I would be inclined to agree with him. Moose Muhammad is probably safer, is more intelligent of a play, is probably closer to being optimal. But I have this thing where I just can't get away from it sometimes. It's that inner voice, as Buzz Lightyear would say, and comes from the gut, your conscience, you just can't get away from it sometimes. And my inner voice / gut is telling me Jade Walker is going to be the play. And it just so happens that he's going to be big time leverage off a probably semi-popular Moose Muhammad. So I'm going to have a hard time getting away from him myself, but I'm making it clear to you there is potential downside. If Walker whiffs and Muhammad doesn't, you might be playing catch up the rest of the day. So be aware of that. If you're somebody that plays based off of ownership, Moose Muhammad is probably more likely to be over 20% owned. than Ja'Day Walker. Walker does have 38 targets on the year, 23 catches, 373 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Anaya Smith over 700 yards. Evan Stewart has really, like I said, fallen off. 514 yards, 4 touchdowns, 38 receptions on 60 targets. There's going to be a lot to go around. We've seen Noah Thomas, who started hot. He's kind of faded away. And really, it's just the Walker and Muhammad show for me. I'm really high on Walker, and I think Muhammad is a great play, just to reiterate that one more time. Let's see. What's the other news that we need to get to here? Got people asking about Texas A&M running backs. I would say no. Moss was our guy, but they're running, pretty even snaps, and it's going to be a situation where I know everybody wants to stack up LSU games because there's going to be a lot of points. Their defense is suspect. The running backs on Texas A&M are all between 4-8 and 5-1. Daniels, he had been the better of the three the last couple of games, but he was very limited last week. Moss barely played, and then you had Reuben Owens, who had 18 carries for 106 yards. There's just no guarantee who's going to be getting the majority of the carries. GPP-wise, go ahead, sure, but I can't see playing them over some of the cheaper running backs that are available to us, which I'm going to go over here in a minute. Ollie Gordon, big decision point today, right? Like, we went back to Ollie Gordon last week after a just atrocious game against UCF. People, felt like, oh, he's broken. It just shows you how fickle the DFS industry can be. And we're part of that as well. A lot of people jumped off. He still had a decent amount of ownership, but not the 70% that we had grown accustomed to. He ends up just banging off 164 yards, 3 touchdowns against Houston. His price is now $9K. Decision point because BYU is a atrocious rushing defense. And overall, just not a very good football team this year, honestly. Ollie Gordon, if given 20-plus touches, will still pay off this $9K price tag. I'm very confident in that. However, he did have those injuries that he was playing through. He was in a walking boot, and it sounds like there's a chance he's just not going to be 100% for this one. I am very nervous about fading him because I do think there are limited spots on this slate that could outscore him. A full game from Ollie Gordon, I don't see a lot of places that could outscore him. Obviously, Jaden Daniels. So it's going to be tough. If you don't think he's going to be 100%, then it makes sense to fade because there's at least a chance, or there's rumblings, there's rumors, there's chatter, there's talk about him not playing the full game. If it gets out of hand, they'll yank him. He's got to start thinking about his next step in his career. I don't know. I think I'd be more worried about like a bowl game for him. I think regular season wise, it still makes too much sense for him to play, but it is a significant salary commitment at $9K over on DraftKings for you if you do go there. I'm not coring him for that reason, letting that decision be up to you guys, but I do feel like he's a very strong play. Obviously, anytime you can get there. Dylan Johnson of Washington, been getting a lot of, what's your lean here? I do feel like he ends up playing. I know he has the official questionable designation. This is the Apple Cup. This is one of the biggest games of the year for the Huskies. Each and every in Washington, the whole state, like Apple Cup fever has struck. And we absolutely, I say we, own the Cougars, and this is going to be a really fun game. I think, all the Oregon Cluck fans that are squawking away on Twitter right now about how the Huskies just don't look very good. I don't care how bad or good they look. We're still undefeated, so go squawk that shit somewhere else, okay? Okay, Bo Nix fans. But I think that Johnson ends up playing. Whether he'll be 100% effective is another question, but I do think he plays, which kind of just muddies the water. 7K, I mean, the Cougars' rush defense is pretty terrible. There should be a lot of points in this game. It would almost be better for at least DFS purposes if he didn't play, because then we could really look at like Ngata, Rogers, Adams, probably Will Nixon. Newton is always, looming around there. But I do think the Huskies get back to throwing the ball a lot tonight for what it's worth, and I think that they're going to chuck it. So it's not as necessary to play a running back from their squad by any means. Utah, let's go there. Never got Brant this year. It's a damn shame. It's a really damn shame. So Bryson Barnes, who just, continues, played some really strong football over the last 3 weeks against ASU, Arizona, and UW. He will not be starting against Colorado. Excuse me. He has been playing with an injury. Nate Johnson, who had some fanfare earlier in the season, is going to be transferring. So Utah playing it relatively safe, looking at starting Luke Batari at 4-5, min price. He is getting the call because of all these injuries. Utah has been just destroyed by injuries, this and transfer portal that. It's just been a really weird season for the Utes. This is the first FBS game he will ever play. He did play for Mighty College of San Mateo back in 2019 and 2020. Obviously, Colorado's defense is terrible. There is an opportunity here for Batari to just crush it. We have seen min price quarterbacks, in fact, just on this very same Utah team, or close to min price, when we had the Nate Johnson game. I believe, what was that, like back in week 2, somewhere in there. Nate Johnson was damn near min price and broke out as chalk. So we can expect a huge pocket of ownership on Luke B because he's cheap. He has the matchup, and people are just going to plug him in because it does allow you to get maybe one of those LSU receivers, 9-6 for Neighbors. My God, that's a lot of money. It does allow you Ollie Gordon if you want. It does allow you Jaden Daniels if you want. There's a lot you can do there. I even saw some chatter pre-Jaden Rashada news of people wanting to use Batari and Rashada together and then playing who you want the rest of the way. I wouldn't recommend that either way, even if Rashada was starting. I think you just got to find a way to pay the $11K for Jaden Daniels. I don't know that we can afford to fade him. He's one of the few players who actually can exceed the production expected from a full game Ollie Gordon. Back-to-back 60 fantasy points. At worst, he's probably throwing down a 30, which honestly would probably be a disaster at this price point, but he's hit over 40 so many times that I'm just confidently playing him. A lot of people asking me about who do I play with Daniels? Are you running him naked? He does have the rushing upside. Doesn't require us to pay for a receiver. Neighbors at 9-6. That's brutality, the epitome of brutality, as John Rothstein would say. Brian Thomas at 8K is a little more affordable and easier to get to. Or you could maybe try to build off the Kieran Lacey game last week when he had 101 yards, 2 touchdowns on 5 receptions. He has scored 11 plus DFS points in 3 of his last 4. 5-3 is not bad. And then you have down there at 4K Marcus Taylor, who has just 1 touchdown this year, but does contribute, 3 to 4 targets per game. Pretty lean play down there. I'd rather play somebody else if it came down to it. So that is the injury news rundown. I know there's going to be some FanDuel questions here, so let me pull up the FanDuel slate. I am guilty of falling out last night in terms of going to bed at a normal hour, 2 a.m. And so I'm a little bit behind on FanDuel. There will be an article for the night slate, though, for those of you who are subbed, just so you know. And then Conference Championship Week, Bowl Week, there's going to be tons of coverage for all that, so have no fear. Let's get in here. Let's check some comments. Let's check some concerns. FanDuel Core, Day. I had a feeling, Day. I had a feeling. So FanDuel Core, I think, man, 13K for Jaden Daniels, it's a lot of money, but I just got to keep throwing Daniels out there regardless. Now, the FanDuel slate does have North Carolina as well. Always love Drake May, but Jaden Daniels, the quarterback that I got to have in all formats. I would say Kansas going up against Cincinnati is interesting. You have Devin Neal there. You have Mario Anderson for South Carolina against Clemson. But the second core, and you also have Clemson going up against that South Carolina team as well. My man Maffa at 7-8. Aiden Robbins is 5-7 for BYU. Oklahoma State is a pretty porous rush defense themselves. A lot of people still haven't figured that out for whatever reason. Getting that savings on FanDuel for a running back that's going to probably get 15-plus touches at 5-7 makes a lot of sense. So he would be the second member of the FanDuel core. And then at receiver, I absolutely love Kevin Concepcion, KC from NC State against North Carolina. He is 8-6. This North Carolina secondary is beatable. They do give up big plays. KC has just risen to the top, one of the most underrated receivers in all of the ACC, possibly the country. And I just love him. It's only $400 cheaper than Troya McMillan from Arizona, who's going to see a lot more ownership, but Kevin Concepcion is a star. And if you don't think he's a star yet, watch what he does today, and you soon will realize it. He's going to be an absolute monster for the next couple of seasons. No doubt about it. Hey, Harry, thanks for subbing to FTN. Thanks for watching the show. I appreciate that very much. You are the man, and I appreciate that. Jamie, my man Jamie in the house. Henderson Walker combined for 60. Petrino rides his motorcycle off into the sunset with intern holding on. You know, that sounds good. What about the intern coming from the rafters, a la Sting, WCW era Sting? Although I think he's still doing that at like 70 years old. Just to kind of tap that off. And then Petrino on his way out, you know, some beers come from the stands. He hits them together. He's drinking them, although most is like spitting out and cut to black. That's how you end a pay-per-view, baby. LJ Johnson or Robbins. Don Play, what's up? What is up, brother? So that's tough. I think on FanDuel Robbins, but I'm a fan of Johnson. He is actually only 4.8 on DK. He makes a ton of sense to me. He is on SMU, which I know will give people some pause. SMU has been a tough team to peg. They have a gluttony of running backs, and they have definitely used them. Their wide receivers are all over the place. This is a very talented running back room. I mean, Jalen Knighton, LJ Johnson, Kamara Wheaton. We want Kamara Wheaton so bad, folks. Tyler Levine, Velton Gardner. There's a name that you probably forgot about. So there's a lot of guys who get looks here. Knighton is expected to play against Navy. He is playing through an injury, which has kind of limited him. He was really good against UNT, but couldn't get it going against Memphis and was only able to play a very low number of snaps, under 10. He's probable. I still, even if Knighton plays like he's probably going to, I think LJ Johnson at 4.8, this Navy team, people aren't going to be looking at SMU guys because Navy, obviously, they're going to be trying to milk the clock. SMU does play at a pace that is very conducive to fantasy goodness. They have for years, regardless of who the quarterback is. Johnson has 15 plus carries in 3 straight games. He does catch passes. He's been over 100 rushing yards in back-to-back games. At 4.8, I feel like he's kind of the Mekhi Hughes play today. Hughes saw some ownership yesterday, obviously, but there were less people on him than there probably should be because of those other looks. I think he does skate under the radar. I really like Johnson to get 20-plus touches once again today, regardless of who's available. Even if Kamara Wheaton, gets 7 to 10 touches, even if Tyler Levine rises from the dead and gets 4 to 5 carries, it's still LJ Johnson. So he's my lean there. Aiden Robbins is really quite good as well, but there is still the chance of the other Martin, LJ, getting work. Now, LJ only had 1 carry last week, 8 in week 11, but I don't know that he's fully dead and casketed just yet. I think he could still end up getting touches. Deion Smith is still pilfering work. So I don't have a full slam on Robbins, even though I know he was great against Oklahoma. He is only 4-1, so you're getting a nice discount there as well. But there is some downside here, and especially if Oklahoma State comes out hot and BYU has to start throwing. If they do have to start throwing, that is going to negate a lot of what Robbins wants to do. Robbins isn't the biggest pass-catching back in the world, so there is risk there still at 4-1. However, I do still like him, especially on FanDuel. But you're not the only one, Alex. Stuck trying to play Daniels and Neighbors on DK. Who are the 2 GPP values I can pair with them? What do you cap your global ownership at for a player? So you're not the only one. I'm getting, there's the hang up of like, I got to have a receiver with my quarterback. You're running Jaden Daniels naked. How could you? College football. That's how, because there's going to be especially a lot of running. And Neighbors just has to do so damn much at 9.6. He's higher than Harrison at this point. Even like a 7 for 140 game and no touchdowns, like that's not going to be enough. And I know that sounds psychotic. He's going to have to score a touchdown, maybe even 2, to get over that 30-point mark, 35 and beyond. he can do it. Absolutely. 9.6 is just a lot. If you really have to have somebody with Daniels, I think maybe just go to Thomas for that $1,600 savings. But if you're hell-bent on doing it, or this is a GPP lineup where you're like, this is my LSU stack, there are some GPP values you can look at. And that brings me to this SMU team once again. I've tried to avoid them most of the season, at least their receivers. They have just a crazy amount of receivers that are getting targets. 8 different players, 8 different players on the team with 28 plus targets. RJ Maryland, their tight end, has a high of 45. Moochie Dixon, who has been around forever, 28. And then you have the running backs after that. All 8 of those players are either a wide receiver or tight end. It's not running backs getting the passing work. I like Keyshawn Smith considerably. And this is a play that's going to get me in trouble because you guys know I've been good about it this year, but I usually kind of fall in love and get married to a really cheap, projected like sub 5% owned receiver. It can be hit or miss if they hit sometimes, but Keyshawn Smith, who has been quietly putting together as nice a season as he could for a receiver room with legitimately 8 different guys who can catch passes. He came over from Miami where he was fairly productive, at least from a touchdown standpoint, had some decent games, not any huge seasons by any means. He has 33 targets this year, 19 catches, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. He caught all 3 of his targets against Memphis for 63 yards, was pretty non-existent against North Texas, had 6 targets against Rice, but only 24 yards. Caught all 3 of his targets against Tulsa for 46, and then 6 targets against ECU, 4 against Temple. We're not going to be getting a volume, any kind of major targeted volume for him at this min price, 3-1, near min price. But he is a threat to catch a touchdown. He is a guy that is much more talented than I think his stats would show. It's just a matter of like all these receivers cannibalizing each other. But I'm dangerously close to using him in a main lineup, even though I probably shouldn't. It's too for you at that against TV. But Keyshawn Smith is somebody at 3-1 that, I mean, shoot, if we can will him to 10 fantasy points, that's just absolutely huge for the rest of your build and allows you to get Daniels and Neighbors, Daniels and Gordon, Daniels and I guess Corum if you want to go there. There's just a lot that you can do with your salary in that regard. Some other cheapies, if you go over to Pittsburgh going up against Duke, Connaughton Field is only 4.5, so sub 5K there for him. He has been a contributor, WR1, WR2 type play. Bub Means is 4.8. If you need a little bit cheaper than those two, I think both of those guys are mispriced. And the matchup against Duke isn't great, but those guys are both in plays. If you need cheaper than that, you can go over to Houston and look at the kid Dalton Carnes, who sits there at 3.5. He had a pocket of ownership last week. 3 catches for 44 yards, 7.5 fantasy points at near min price. He has been contributing at least 1 reception each week. It is a lean play, but GPP-wise, he could catch one this game against UCF. Both defenses are pretty poor. Carnes, a victim sometimes of having Donovan Smith at quarterback, but he only really needs 1 big reception or a touchdown to absolutely murder that 3.5 price. So that is another guy, cheapie, that you could look at. Let's see. The ASU guys, we talked about Conyers, O'Meara, either one of those. Tennessee still has very cheap Ramel Keaton at 4.3. Just pains me to not be able to use him, but in GPPs, absolutely. And then on the Tennessee side, if you want to try Jabari Small, 3.1. GPP special at near min price. Small. He rushed for 700 plus yards in back-to-back seasons heading into this one. Hasn't been a factor this year. Just it's pretty wild that he hasn't been able to pan out. But the Vanderbilt matchup is usually a get-right spot for all running backs. He isn't going to get bell cow carries, 6 to 10 touches probably, but he can definitely house one of those against the Vanderbilt team. I prefer Jalen Wright. I was going to get to him anyways. He is a big play threat, can take any touch to the house. 75-yard rush against Georgia, 82-yard rush against UConn, 52-yard rush against Kentucky, and a 42-yard carry against South Carolina. Big play threat. Not a ton of volume, but super efficient. He is 5'2". I really like him, so I want to throw that out there. But Jamari Small is somebody else, a cheapie that you could definitely look at. Hello. Okay, global ownership. Hold on. That's Seattle Air, man. Global ownership for a player. So I rarely ever go 100% on, especially in football. Rarely ever go 100% on anyone. College basketball is different because if I have a read on someone, I'll play them in every lineup. I don't care, especially if they're a posh play of the day. I mean, it really depends. Quarterbacks and running backs higher, like 6, depending on how many lineups you do. I'm usually around 75% on plays that are in my core, and then wide receivers, I'm usually maxed out at around 50, even if they're a really good bet, because there's just so much variance and volatility with wide receivers, especially when they have poor quarterbacks or unknown quarterbacks coming into the mix. QB2 for main build on FanDuel. So Daniel's number 1. You have my man Brendan Armstrong of NC State playing UNC. He's back in the mix, man. He's back. He's doing some things. He's looking good. He's 8-3 on FanDuel. Can you use him in your main? I think you can. This is a spot for Armstrong to prove all the doubters wrong. He still has rushing upside. He has weapons available. If that is too wild for you today, and Jalen Henderson is only 100 more at 8-4 going up against LSU, and you can use 2 quarterbacks from the same game because of how LSU plays in your primary build. I don't think that you're going to have the luxury to be like JRP as your QB2, Michael Penix, 11-5. Like, you're going to have to play a second quarterback under 9K. Just seems like an inevitability. JJ McCarthy down there at 7-6. I wouldn't recommend that, but I do see chatter about him. I mean, couldn't even use Cam Ward because he's almost 11K. You could maybe look at Rashada at 6'8" if you really want to get crazy, right? But for me, I think it makes a lot of sense to just go Brendan Armstrong or Jalen Henderson. That's what I would do on FanDuel. Yep, Brandon Armstrong, baby. Man, you see, hey, Alex, you see what Parker did in the second half, dude? After 2,005 minutes, 0 fantasy points, people talking about, is he hurt? What happened? And then he comes out and has like 18 in the second half. Man, Parker is that dude. He is that dude, man. I am so excited about Dennis Parker. All right, let's keep it rolling here. Appreciate it, Alex. Thank you, Alex Davidson. And then I got Aquasaw, my other Alex, my NC State. I'm playing Denzel Boston, and he's going to become an Apple Cup legend. You know, you talking dirty to me, brother. I love Denzel Boston. We're habitually early on players. So how many times we'll be like on somebody, and then they have like maybe a mediocre game and it was like not time. 2 weeks later, not on the slate, they just absolutely explode. Going back to college basketball, Dame Adelkun has like 40 fantasy points 2 games later after we were on him. Like, we have that happen so often. I was probably way too early on Denzel Boston. Now, he didn't play against Wazoo. I think that's a great like all GPP play. I don't know how many snaps he'll even get if he does play. He's just super raw. Next year, Denzel Boston is going to be a dude. Odunze will be, off to the pro level. Polk will probably be a professional very soon. McMillan, I don't know if he's going to end up staying now because he's been hurt so much, but there will be a lot of Denzel Boston next year. Please believe that, my guy. All right, let's go through the Discord here. Glover, Lacey, or Jalen Wright, Taylor. So really trying to get the LSU exposure there. Glover of Utah. Let's talk about Utah running backs. It's a great spot. Like, let's actually just talk about Utah. That leads us into here. So I'll get your question answered. But Utah, normally we're falling all over ourselves to stack teams against Colorado. Has been the case all year round. Now, I don't really know what to expect from Batari. I think he's going to have some nerves. I do think the opportunistic Colorado defense that gambles and takes chances and gets burned often will get in this kid's head at least a few times. I do foresee him getting picked off. But once he calms down, settles in, there will be some points scored here. And it would behoove the Utes to really take some pressure off him by running the hell out of Jaquin and Jackson. our guy Sean Vacky, even though they don't usually run him as much anymore, and Jalen Glover. I wouldn't recommend running Glover in your main at 3.9. He's just not getting enough carries, but he is certainly a nice GPP look, no doubt. If you can get to 5.3 to Jackson, I do think we see him spike closer to 20 touches today, which puts him firmly in play. Vacky had 4 carries last week, 1 reception. They're still kind of, factoring him in. DK's just super scared to price him down at 5.2. We can't actually use him, but just got to be aware that a big play from him is probably coming today. As far as Lacey, I think he is here to stay. He's always been talented when he was in the Fun Belt, and he is a better play than Taylor, but the better combination is probably Taylor, because at least, right, you're going to get 10 plus touches. Taylor's going to get 2 to 4 targets. I can't guarantee even 5 touches for Glover. Lacey, there's going to be a variance there with his targets anywhere from 2 to 10, depending on what happens with the other players and how the defense approaches that LSU game. So I would say Wright, Taylor. I am very high on Jalen Wright. I'm kind of committed to that play. It's weird because I haven't played him all season long, and now I'm like close to all in, but he just seems like this is going to be the spot where he breaks one of his big plays. Like first touch, 80-yard touchdown, and then I can breathe easy. Sean Smith, probably a coin flip. I will have more Smith than Carnes, personally. Smith is a very lean play, and there's a lot of downside, but I just feel like at 3-1, he at least gives us an opportunity to make up for any misses or minimal points he has by going to Jaden Daniels, Ollie Gordon, some of those guys. Yes, I have interest in Small. Just talked about him a little bit. He is a really productive running back over the last 2 years. It just doesn't make sense for him not to be involved, but he's definitely in play for GP. Logan Diggs back for LSU, by the way. That certainly hold on here. That is solid. I wouldn't be using him, but that definitely takes some of the rushing upside away from Daniels to a degree. Had a bit of FanDuel early slate news here with Purdue. Hudson Card will be starting. I know that's Jake's guy, Hudson Card. So in case anyone was caring about the Purdue squad there with Hudson Card, he will be in. Let's see. Getting some questions about Parker Jenkins as a value RB. Anyone going up against UCF, man, like their rush defense is really, really poor. I know that they somehow cuffed Ollie Gordon, but that was an anomaly, not the norm. Parker Jenkins did have 12 carries last week for 56 yards, had a couple of receptions. 4.7's a fine price for him. I think it's not cheap enough under Jalen Wright for him to be a main team play, and that's only because Donovan Smith takes a lot of the rushing away, and also Houston, they're really committed to throwing the football even with Smith, and there's been stretches and drives where they just throw it every single time, and it gets frustrating. They have some decent guys like Tony Mathis, who showed out in West Virginia at times. He's been getting about 5 to 6 touches every game. Stacy Sneed, who did not get any work the last 2 games. He's kind of, looming there, but they just don't run it as much. But if they decide to, Jenkins is the obvious choice for getting those carries. But just be aware that if they get into the goal line, the red zone, whatever, Smith is probably calling his own number. He's rushed for 63 plus yards in 3 straight, scored 2 rushing touchdowns. He has been picked off 7 times in the last 3 games. So they're just winging it. This Houston offense, it seems like they're on the morphine drip and they're ready to call it a year. And I just don't foresee their offense, even though they're projected to score a lot, I don't think they're going to be super efficient. I think they're going to be underwhelming, honestly, which could possibly hurt even the UCF place more than people probably realize. Conyers or Amir? What's up, Brett? So let's pull this up. Conyers, conventional wisdom. We don't necessarily subscribe to conventional around here. would be the play. He's second on the team in targets with 46. Badger just a psycho. 100 targets for Badger. Second on the team, 46. 27 receptions, 351 yards. O'Meara, 35 targets, 17 catches, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. Troy O'Meara has nice upside in this spot. He is coming off back-to-back games in which he had 7 targets and 8. So, heavily targeted the last 2 games, 15 against tough defenses in UCLA and Oregon. Now he's getting a spot where defense is still kind of upper tier, but not impossible. High pedigree for O'Meara. He spent a little bit of time last year with Texas, only 1 catch in that time with them. So I actually think he makes the most sense just from a leverage, ownership, upside standpoint. Conyers is more safe, but I don't know that Conyers is going to have the upside that we're really looking for. 6 targets against Oregon, but only 2 for 38. 2 targets against UCLA, 1 for 3. To me, O'Meara kind of steps into that Badger role, and we'll see a high amount of targets. Conyers is still going to be limited to if they get into the red zone. That's a big if. Red zone work, short yardage situations, things like that. So Conyers is the quote-unquote safe play, but O'Meara, man, if I had the 3-6 for O'Meara instead of 3-1 for Keyshawn Smith, just to maybe put that in perspective, I wouldn't bat an eye about playing O'Meara over Smith. I do like him quite a bit today. Lamonius Craig from Arizona or Landon King. Now, Lamonius Craig was a play that we kind of liked last. Did mention him on the show. It was if Cowing is limited or out, he wasn't out, but he certainly was limited. Only 2 catches for 5 receptions. Lamonius Craig sitting there at 3.6. He caught a 32-yard touchdown. It's a second touchdown in 3 weeks. Has double-digit fantasy points, 10+ on DK in 3 straight games. I don't mind him. This ASU defense has been a lackluster group. I don't think that Cowing is anywhere near 100%. He's a nice price at 6.7, but I don't think we can use him. I'm seeing a ton of ownership projection onto Troy McMillan coming off back-to-back 100-yard receiving games at 7K. The tight end, Tanner McLachlan, at 4.2. He's been pretty steady, the old 5 for 50 stat line that he gives us. And then you got Lamonius Craig there as the kind of the 4th option in the passing game. But he has been contributing. 9 receptions since past 3, 2 touchdowns. So at 3.6, I don't mind that one at all. It's more of a GPP spot, right? But definitely in play. Landon King at 3.3 for Utah, coming off a game in which he had 4 receptions, 63 yards, even had a 4-yard carry. Looks like they're wanting to get him more work. He has 10 receptions over his last 3 games. I think looking at matchups and injuries and all that, he would probably make more sense than Lamonius Craig in a main team situation. I like Lamonius Craig as a GPP type one-off. They really need another option in the passing game, and tight ends for Utah have historically been really good fantasy options. Throughout the years, Brant Kuthi was our guy. King has been rising steadily up the board. He's 4th on the team in targets now. Mikey Matthews was looked at as kind of, maybe overseeing and overstepping Devon Bailey as the WR1. That didn't happen. Bailey's still the clear, far and away best option in the receiver room, but Landon King is definitely rising as a tight end that, coming off 6 targets last week. He had 3 the week before and then another 6 against Arizona State. So good matchup for him. Targets trending up. He had just 4 targets in the previous 6 weeks. Now he has 15 in the past 3. So he is certainly worth a shot, worth a look at 3.3 if you can get there. He's another one that I would, if I had 3.3, not 3.1, I would play over Keyshawn Smith. I'm only playing Smith because I want Ollie Gordon and I want Jaden Daniels. I'll just live with whatever news happens with Gordon. If I have to swap out later, I will. There's still some looks later, I'll just move my super flex to a wide receiver or something like that and play Rome and Dunze or something. And that's kind of how I'm playing it. So I don't have the 3.3 for him even. I'm only really playing Smith because I have min price for a receiver has to be a receiver, and I'm kind of just living with whatever result happens there. With Yasmin and Kuthi both out, no other real tight ends on the roster, it does make a lot of sense to look at Landon King. That's a nice call out. They it coincides with his recent spike in targets, usage, and production, being one of the few games in town when it comes to the tight end position for a very, very injured Utah Utes team. So Landon King it is for me, my brother. Why are we playing small? Sorry, just got in. I think he's talking about a GPP play for small because the matchup's great, but I'm on right, obviously. Rather pair small with 6,500 flex play than right Taylor. This is my final piece of the puzzle. Well, let's see what you'd get at 60. I mean, you're not going to get much with small, man. He might break a play, but I just here. Let me pull up. Here's what I'll do. Let me pull up the snap report. Should have already had this up. So me bad. All right. Let's pull up snaps. And let's look at Tennessee. 850. All right, we're going to wrap up here in just a couple minutes as well. Sorry, I have 142 pages of snaps, so bear with me here. All right, so Jamari Small, last 5, these are snap percentages. 31.2, 24.4, 24.6, 14.8, 36.4. Dylan Sampson, who is technically the RB3, but only in name, 20.8%, 34.1, 46.4, 52.5, and 12.7. Jalen Wright, 48.1, 40.2, 29, 22.7, 32.8, and 45.5%. So, I mean, you're kind of just, I think you're being unnecessarily risky by talking so much about Jabari Small. But that's a fine near min price GPP shot, but I don't know that makes too much sense in your main lineup, man. I think that's unnecessary. However, if it gets you Daniels, Neighbors, those guys, it might be fine. If you want to go that route and you need a 6,500 or less flex play, you have, Travis Hunter. If you want to go that route, you have the Isaac Arundo kid for Louisville at 6'3", Egbuka at 6'3". There are a few plays, Javon Baker at 6K, Presley at 5'9" after he just melted the slate. You have some looks, but I don't know that that's a very good look. So I would still prefer Wright Taylor, honestly. Victor Omier or Baker Walker. So I'm high on Walker. I already said that, but Omier is intriguing and Victor is nice. It's probably closer to a flip, but Victor versus my Huskies is ham. Typing that out as I say it. Touch on Nimrod. No, I'm not playing Tennessee receivers. Yeah, I mean, I love Ramel Keaton. I hope he transfers out or he sticks around and plays with our guy, Nico. Nimrod's there at 3.5. I know he had 5 catches for 44 yards. While we're on the Tennessee snaps, let's look at his. And I know he played a lot last week at least. It's 5 for Nimrod's snaps percentage. 59.8, 24.6, 27.3, 34.4, and 80. So he was on the field a lot last week. As far as opportunity goes, he has opportunity, but poor quarterback play, a great matchup, an inaccurate quarterback who can throw the football over the mountains like Uncle Rico, but can't hit a guy in the numbers makes it really tough. I think Squirrel White is actually somebody who could make a lot of sense here, although I'm not paying 5.7 for him. Keaton I like for a big play, and then yes, you have Nimrod. You could even maybe talk about McCollin McCassell, who is a short yardage specialist for them. He's fine. 3.5. I mean, he's probably as good as any sub 4K receiver that you can get on this slate. But I don't have any strong lean there other than that. Do you think dropping from Johnson to Small and upgrading wide receiver is a bad idea? Maybe not a bad idea, but not a priority. I think we're getting a lot of like hype for Jabari Small all of a sudden. I'm trying to make it clear, like I'm not saying Jabari Small is like the sneak of the slate and needs to be played. So like I don't know why this is turning into a Jabari Small like super show, but I am not on him like that. So if you do use him, that's fine, but I'm not like telling you he's going to go and break the slate. I hope he does for you, but that's a very lean play. I don't know that there's enough touches, but he doesn't need a lot against Vanderbilt. And then Taylor or Lacey, a coin flip for you. Lacey, if salary isn't an issue, I think that kind of goes without saying, honestly. All right, so we're just about 5-6 minutes away. Let's get over here. This is a jam-packed show. I appreciate everybody who has stuck with us. There was a lot to go over, especially with the fact that we had 2 major slates the past 2 days. Let's look at props. We got some decent rushing props here. Get down here. They're really trying to bait me with this Jarquez Hunter number. It's only 57.5 rushing yards, but they're playing Alabama. So I'll stay disciplined and not get baited into that one. The Aiden Robbins prop of 60.5 rushing yards at -115. I do like the over there against Oklahoma State. They did make Jalen Wright 93.5 rushing yards, but I have taken rushing overs 4 different times against Vanderbilt, even with struggling running backs like Jarquez Hunter of Auburn going into that game, and he obliterated his number. So I'm inclined to think Jalen Wright rushes for 100 yards today, even if he only gets 12 carries. Might that be a hot take? Probably, but I'm very confident and comfortable there. Audric S over 107.5 rushing yards against Stanford. I just don't care. I just feel like every week Audric is the man. He's going to rush for 120 yards, so I just keep taking the over with no fear whatsoever. Jaden Daniels over 2.5 passing touchdowns. It's -195, so you might want to put it with something else, but he's throwing for 4 touchdowns today, probably 6, honestly. There's also, let's see. Tempted to take the Milton under, but I won't, just because that's probably a little too reckless. You have my man Garrett Green going up against Baylor. Garrett Green, of course, the quarterback for West Virginia. He is an absolute stud. His rushing prop is 56.5. He's going to rush for 100 yards again. I am always rostering Garrett Green whenever West Virginia's on the slate, and going up against Baylor, watch him put up some sicko numbers. All right, real quick, ownership, just so you know, we're about to lock. I know it's coming up, creeped up on us. Top 3 owned quarterbacks: Jalen Henderson, Jaden Daniels, Luke Batari. That's not in order. That's just going to be the 3 highest owned quarterbacks in any order. Jaquindon Jackson, RJ Harvey, probably Ollie Gordon at the running back spot. And then wide receiver, I think Devon Bailey, just because of his price, McMillan, and Lincoln Victor going up against the Huskies. Those are your top 3 highest owned players at each position. Thanks, everybody who continues to support the show. We'll be back Monday night with the CBB version. Lots of content coming in the Discord and some written articles for the night slate and the CBB main slate, which I believe is a 5-gamer. Let's get out of here. Let's go watch some football. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you guys next time.